with life experiences of health and wellness, as well as disease and death, Kathy Mattea's words and music have spread her messages to venues across America, from Maine to Alaska, and overseas, from England to Morocco, from Capitol rotundas to college buildings, and from arts and music festivals to concert halls, and now to the Haas Center for the Arts at Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania. Ladies and gentlemen, the Health Sciences Symposium Committee is proud to present Ms. Kathy Mattea.
I wasn't nervous till I heard that introduction, and now I'm terrified. I want to thank Ira for that lovely introduction, to Randall for bringing me here and sort of bringing up the idea, to Joe Miller for all her lovely conversation over dinner, and to President Soltz for his hospitality as well. And it's an honor to be here with you all, and thrilled to be asked to be here and open this conversation, because the healing power of the arts is the ongoing conversation that underlies everything I do just about in my life. So I like to spend time talking about this. When she said, Ms. Mattea said, there are times when I can't not speak. I'm thinking every day is a day when I can't not speak. It's kind of how I am. But I should let you know before we start, though, that even though I'm going to talk about the healing power of the arts, for me there's a difference between being healed and being cured. They're two completely different processes. As someone who's lived a life that's revolved around the arts, I've experienced over and over the way they flavored every other experience I've had. And so what I thought I'd do is tell you a little bit about my own story, share some stories about my early encounters with the arts and some really important moments where the arts really made a difference in my life, and then maybe sing a couple of songs, and then maybe we'll have a little conversation afterwards. So I grew up in West Virginia, small state next door. I can't tell you how happy I am to not have to explain to you the geography of the eastern United States. And lots of times out on the road I have to make sure people know that we are nowhere near Richmond. We're our own state now. And I grew up in a little town called Cross Lanes, West Virginia. It was named for the stoplight. We were very proud of our stoplight. We had 4 corners in our town, and we had everything you would need. We had a gas station. We had a grocery store. We had a combination post office / hardware store, and we had a beer joint. So really, you didn't really need to leave for much. My mom was a homemaker. My dad worked at a chemical plant at Monsanto, and I had 2 older brothers, and I was the surprise that happened 9 years after my nearest brother was born. And the family story goes that I came out talking, and I learned to read by asking questions. What's that? What's that? What's that? In the newspaper. What is this word? What is this word? And my brothers would give me homework, little math problems. So when I got into the 1st grade, I went to school and they realized I could read and I could do math. So the next thing I knew, they were taking me uptown and giving me tests to find out exactly what the heck was going on with this kid. And there's a famous family story where my mom was sitting in the lobby of the Board of Education, and the guy goes in there with me for a few minutes, and he comes back out and closes the door behind her, and then he looks at her and he says, "You don't have any more like her at home, do you?" And she just said, "No, but I've been home with her 6 years. You're going to tell me what to do." And now they just give me a big dose of Ritalin and be done with me. But it wasn't like that back then. And so they took me seriously, and they told my mom not to let her get bored, because things came easy to me, and if I got bored, I would learn that I really didn't have to make much effort in life. So my mom took me seriously, and she put me in scouts and ice skating, horseback riding, and piano and dance lessons, and the only things that didn't eventually start boring me had to do with music and performance. And so that kind of started to become a bit of a theme. And I got into school, I got into choir and band, and I started to do like the little theater projects in school, and I started to sing in the church that I was going to, and I had the lead in my high school play, a musical in high school, and suddenly I started to find this thread running through everything that I did. I was still the whiz kid, though, in my community and in my family, and I was really good at math and science. But I began to notice something. I began to notice that I was good at music, but I really enjoyed it at the same time. And that somehow I felt more alive when I was playing music than I did when I was doing the other stuff. But my parents were Depression kids, and they grew up in little coal towns, so they wanted us to all get an education so we'd have some security. So I wound up at West Virginia University, and I was studying engineering and physics and chemistry. But in every single spare moment of my time, I was playing music. I sat out till the wee hours playing guitar and singing songs every chance I could get. It was an informal music education, but I found it because the musicians were my tribe. Those were my people. That's where I started writing songs. We'd write songs. We eventually started writing songs about all our friends that lived next to us in the dorm and across the street in the houses. And then they'd learn the verses that were written about them, and they'd sing along. If you want to try this, it helps to have a keg of beer that you just tapped a few hours ago. So here I am, and I'm having the time of my life. I'm in school, and I'm in my sophomore year, and I have this big community, and every weekend we sit around playing music. And, I'm going to school, and I've got a really good grade point average. I'm kind of on this track. And one day, my friend Nick comes to me, and he and I had been doing most of the writing for a little band that we had finally started. We didn't really start it. Actually, we would just start playing on the porch on Friday night. And finally, the police just would come out and block the streets off because there'd be 100, 200 people out in the street by 9 o'clock. And one night they just came to us and said, well, you all just give yourselves a name and go into the college bars because really, we have better things to do than come block off your street every weekend. So that's how my first band got formed. But my friend Mickey came to me one day and he said, you know, I'm going to be graduating and I'm going to go to Nashville. I just always wanted to. I'll go to Nashville and be a songwriter. Because I've always said I was going to do that. And I thought, well, that's great. That's great for you. But I'm at the end of my sophomore year. I have more to do here. And as I watched him get ready to move, pack his bags and make his plans, I must have had quite the look of envy on my face. Because one day he looked at me and said, well, you know, you can come with me if you want. And I felt this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I didn't really understand it at that point. But what I realized in looking back is that that was a life-changing moment for me. Because if I said yes, I was going to have to throw everything back in the face of my parents that they had offered me. If I said yes and I went to Nashville, I was going to have to throw this college education away, all these expectations. But if I said no, I would wonder for the rest of my life, what would have happened if I went to Nashville? What would have happened? And I kept trying to make this decision, and I would imagine going, and I'd be terrified. And I'd imagine staying, and I'd be terrified. And I decided to stay up at college that summer and get a job, and just so I could sort of hang out with the guys in the band before we all had to blow up and, you know, go our separate ways in the fall. And so I got this job selling cheese, one of those little minimum wage jobs in this tiny little mall. We had a mall, though we were very proud of it. And I had to wear this little gingham shirt and this little dress that looked like overalls. You know, it was very dignified kind of summer job for a college student. And the woman that ran the Hickory Farms there, her life was all about cheese. I mean, this woman lived for cheese. And unfortunately, I could not will myself for my life to revolve around cheese the way this woman really wanted me to. So she called me into her office one day and she said, "We don't think you're Hickory Farms material." And I thought, well, that's fine, you know, I mean, I can live without summer sausage, it's fine. And I was absolutely shocked because this little crappy job that I could not care less about, I just got fired from. And I went into a really big depression. Because I had never failed at anything in my life, right? I was the whiz kid. I was the one who could figure it out. So I came home and promptly sat around feeling sorry for myself while my roommates went to work every day. And one day I was sitting in my chair on the porch, trying to figure out what to do next. And by the way, I had broken up with my college boyfriend at this time too. We had sort of gone by the wayside after about a year. So it felt like everything in my life was falling apart. And this voice came into my head and said, if you look at this like a crisis, it'll be a crisis. And if you look at this like an opportunity, it'll be an opportunity. And it suddenly hit me that I was a year younger than everyone in my class. I could do college in my sleep. And if I went to Nashville and just tried it for a while, I might have a chance at a more interesting life. So I picked up the phone and I called my parents. "Mom, Dad, thanks for everything. School has been just great. Hey, guess what? I think I'm going to quit and move to Nashville with Mickey and be a songwriter. Aren't you happy for me?" And I would just like to not recommend this to you guys as any kind of advice, but it was definitely a life-changing moment. But there was this thing that I realized looking back, which was I felt something different when I played music than I did when I was doing all the other stuff. And I thought, wow, you know, maybe if I go to Nashville and I become a musician, I'll have a chance at living a more interesting life. What I didn't know then that I know now is that music was the center of everything I cared about. So it was like, can you ante up? Can you go with that? What happens if you go with that instead of doing what everybody thinks you should be doing? And the sense of who I was and what my life might be able to be was in me because I'd had so much experience and opportunity with the arts when I was growing up. They were around. People in my community cared about them in particular for young people. And what I got to learn from all of that was that when I was working on the arts, it was still work, but it had a sense of synergy to it. It was an experience that was bigger than the sum of its parts. And that's what I believe is the real importance of the arts. This experience that's bigger than the sum of its parts. I think the arts touch the divine in our world. And there are two examples from my young life that I remember as the beginning of this realization. And one was in junior high school. I was in the band. My friend Dana was playing drums, and she said, "You gotta go out for band with me." So by the time I went to sign up, all the drums were gone, so I started playing French horn, and that was what our band director played. So I don't recommend playing French horn in a marching band. It's quite boring, but we had this new school when I was in the 8th grade, and so we had taken little dribs and drabs of people from other schools and made a new junior high school. And we were all just starting their instruments. You know, none of us had played very much, so we were awful. So we would sit in this band class every day, and we would slog through these songs, and it was absolute noise for the whole time. And this very earnest new band director just out of college, you know, he would just work with us, and we were just like, whatever. And we'd play through this stuff, and it was just god-awful. And one day, we were doing exactly that, and I started to hear something. I started to hear something in the noise. And I thought, what is that? And it turned out to be a melody. It was music, and there was still a lot of noise. But this music was starting to come like through the fog. And then I got to realize, oh, that trumpet player across the room over there, what he's playing, that fits with what I'm playing. I'm playing a harmony part to him. So I started to listen as I played. And I started to listen for him, and I tried to play with him. And over the course of the next few months, we made music together. I can still remember the name of the piece. It was called Marshmallow. Part of why I remember it is we all called it Marshmallow, because we were 8th graders. But it had stopped being noise and it started being music. And we started being able to play this piece in a way that anyone walking in the room could hear it. And I had my little part in it, but suddenly my boring French horn part that was awful to go home and try to practice alone in my room made sense in a bigger context. And it was part of something beautiful that we could translate and communicate to other people. And I didn't know this trumpet player guy across the room. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know anything about his family, but we were connected. We were connected by this common experience we had. And it woke something up in me. The second really important moment that I remember was in high school. And I was in choir, and I had auditioned and made all-state choir. And this was my senior year, and it was in Huntington that year. I lived just outside of Charleston. So, you audition for this, the choir director chooses 8 people, and you rehearse this music all year once you sort of made the audition, and there's 8 of you in a room rehearsing all these songs. And then suddenly, all these people who've been rehearsing the same music all over the state come together, and we all get together and sing this music in one big choir. And you get out of school to just go sing for 3 days. So we were in Huntington, and we were, had been singing all day, and we were excited, and every hotel in the city was filled with high school kids. And we were in this tiny little motel, and it was one of those U-shaped places. It was 2 stories high, and all the doors opened out onto the outside. So there was this balcony upstairs where everybody's door opened out to. And, we had all this energy, so we were all kind of running back and forth, getting to know each other between rooms and stuff. Some of the doors were open. It was a lovely spring night. And suddenly, someone started singing. Someone walked out to the balcony and started singing. And it was one of the songs we've been singing all day. And someone else started singing, and someone else, and someone else. And as the sound got bigger and bigger, doors that were closed started to open, and kids came out. And they started singing too. Until the balcony was just lined with people singing into the evening. We didn't need a conductor. We didn't need a piano. We just sang because we could. We sang because it was joyful. We sang because we all knew the same music. We sang because somewhere deep inside of us we knew that this weekend would only last for a brief moment in time when we could do this together, and then it would be gone. And I remember standing there on that balcony, and this guy drove into the parking lot to check out, and he pulled in, and he parked his car, and he opened the door, and he got out, and he just looked up and stopped in his tracks. And we watched him, and he watched us. And we sang to him, and we saw ourselves reflected back in his face. And this tiny little moment just expanded into eternity. We were giving a gift, and we were receiving a gift at the same time. And I have to tell you, I've long since forgotten the concert. I have no recollection what the music was. But that moment on that balcony, that's with me still. I can feel it. I can feel the evening breeze on my face. And I can put myself back there at any moment. And the connection that we had to each other, to this man that we didn't know, and to ourselves. I'm here to say that there is so much more to that moment than just music. We measure math and science, and we can quantify it, and we can see how it applies in the world. But this very fleeting experience, this experience that's so hard to put into words, this opening of the soul, this sense of connection and communion that's beyond words. How do we talk about that? How do we advocate for it? How do you present that as soundbite? How do you say to Congress when they want to cut NEA funding, what will be lost? These moments, these life-changing moments. In my opinion, the arts are the seed of compassion in our culture. It's the arts that remind us of our connection to one another. You know, you come to something like this, you come to a show in a room like this, and maybe it's a play, or maybe it's a concert, and you come in and you've left your house and you've gotten dressed up and you've driven across town and you walk in and you have your ticket, someone shows you where you're going and you come down the aisle and you sort of start to scope out where your neighborhood's going to be for the night. And maybe you see somebody you know across the room and you wave and you're like, oh, they like the same thing I do, and you get that kind of a connection going on. And then you find your way to your seat and you sit down and then, what do you do with your coat, and where's your purse go? And then there's that person next to you, that's like closer than a stranger would ever be on any given day in your life. And you do that little nonverbal negotiation thing of like, how are you going to deal with the one armrest between you, well, I get the front, you get the back, or I'll give it to you, and all of those little things, and you're just kind of like out of your comfort zone. And then suddenly the lights go down, and all of that is gone. Everything disappears in the light of a great performance. We're taken out of time. We don't experience the separation between us. We become one. And we get to have a transcendent experience. We react involuntarily as one. We laugh together. We gasp together. Sometimes we cry together. And we remember for that brief moment that we are part of something so much bigger going on here on this earth. And we touch the mystery. And the experience sitting in a room like this in the dark, it cuts through all the masks that we wear in our society. It doesn't matter there in the dark what you wore, or what part of town you came from, or what kind of car you drove there. Everyone, this performance is offered equally to everyone. It's about equality, it's about connection, it's about radical humility, and it is the seed of compassion, I believe. And it's my opinion that this compassion, not as some intellectual concept or some moral imperative, but as a remembered experience, a glimpse into the divine gift of being human. This compassion and connection is the seed of healing in our society. If we can keep the arts alive, we keep community and connection alive. And we remember our shared humanity and the deep human longings that we all carry inside of us that we have in common, that just go unspoken most of the time. When we're an open vessel, compassionately connected to each other, we are a community. And it's hard to blow somebody up when they're part of your tribe. That is, I believe, the real role of the arts. They bring us back to the remembering over and over again of that connection between us. In the midst of the safety of knowledge and the easily measurable intellectual stuff, the internet full of information and opinion, and the sniping in the comments section under the cloak of anonymity, the arts hold a space for us to return to and to continue through the noise to affirm the soulfulness of life itself. So maybe if we can keep the arts alive, we'll remember that connection in a moment of sanity, and maybe there's hope yet that we'll pull back before we blow each other up. Whether that's in a family that's fractured, or whether it's a building in New York, or whether it's a disenfranchised kid with an improvised explosive device on the streets of Boston. I think the arts give us a glimpse of the way out of insanity and an experience of heaven on earth. and the connection that we were sent here to discover, this grand puzzle that God put us here in the human experience to unravel. I shudder to think of what my life would be without the arts and the gifts they've opened me up to. And I'm so grateful for the chance to talk about this today. I want to not just talk, though. I do want to play some music because it seems crazy to stand here and talk to you about the arts and have a life steeped in music and not play any songs. So I want to play some songs, and I want to tell you some stories about what they've meant to me and some of the things that have happened to me as a result of spending so much of my life playing music. So I'm going to go over here. I have this friend named Vivian. And Vivian had ovarian cancer, and then she went into remission for a long time. And I hadn't seen her in a while. And then I got word through the grapevine of our mutual friends that her cancer had come back. And I was working on the road a bunch. And the next thing I heard was that she had gone into a coma, and they'd moved her to the hospice house in Nashville. So I got a call because Vivian loved music. And they said, look, we're trying to get people to come and sing for her because we know that the hearing is the last thing to be lost. So I came in off the road and I rolled in on a Sunday morning on the bus, and I took my stuff to my house, and I picked up my cell phone, and I called Vivian's husband, and I said, hey, it's Kathy. I was just calling about maybe coming down and singing. And he said, I can't talk to you right now. Vivian just woke up. Click. And after almost a week, she just woke up one day and looked around the room. And she stayed that way. And she started to eat. And it got to the point where the hospice people were like, hey, we're not really about this part, And she was like, the heck you say? I don't know what's going on, but I'm not moving. And it became this kind of jokey conversation. But what Vivian said was that the whole time she was in the coma, that she was in this little boat, and that she was floating between worlds. And that it was so beautiful, she couldn't put words to it, but all she kept saying was, it's all love. It's all love and music. It's all about love and music. That's all there is. And I have to go back and tell them. So, I want to read you a little bit of what she said about that, because this was her last entry on her own Hearing Bridge journal. She said, my little coma boat was redirected back home and not to the beyond, buoyed by so much love and music and free acts of generosity that still amaze and astound and surprise me. Let no one say that convalescence is easy work. It's a mixture of some activity, exercise, rest, good food, positive influences, and still having to deal with harsh realities that could rip the time right out of your burgeoning throat, hungry and bobbing at once for its succulent worms of this life. And yet, the coma told me that we exist beyond time. We communicate in ways there's no accounting for, and we are one in myriad ways we'll never understand. I want to live because I want to sing, want to dance, want to celebrate this great circle with all of us. I want the bonds formed on this earth to be strong enough to add to the very fabric of the healing of the earth. So I went to see Vivian. Just showed up over there one day. Stuck my head in the door, and she was there by herself with one young man. And he had a guitar, and he was playing an instrumental. And she saw me, and she went, so I came in and I sat down and I listened to the rest of his song. We visited a little bit. And she went, you play one. So I borrowed the guitar and I played a song. And then she said, hey, you do that Dance a Little Closer song, don't you? That's you, isn't it? Oh, I love that song. She said, there's not much left of me. I'm pretty frail. So it's hard for me to move around by myself. So when I have to take a shower, my husband stands me up and I put my arms around his neck and he dances me backwards into the shower and I sing in his ear. Dance a little closer, Dance a little closer now, which is one of my songs. And to think of the ways that music marks people's lives, and to be part of that in these moments, whether it's a lightning or an opening to mourning or celebration, which are really just two sides of the same coin in my opinion. It's an amazing thing, and if you notice, all of the high and low points in our lives are marked with music. So I gave a little concert that night, that day, to two people, but it's also one of my most treasured memories. So I thought I'd sing that song for you. Rita was 16 years, hazel eyes and chestnut hair. She made the work out of shine. And Eddie was a sweet romancer and a darn good dancer. And it was the lives of the five dime. Now Eddie played the steel guitar, his mom cried because he played the bars. He kept young Rita out late at night. So they married up in Halloween, lost a child in Tennessee. Oh, and still I was alive. 'Cause they'd sing, dance a little closer to me, dance a little closer now, dance a little closer tonight, dance a little closer to me, 'cause it's closing time, love's on sale tonight at this fine night. Now one of the boys in Eddie's band took a shine to Rita's hand, so Eddie ran off with the bassman's wife. Oh, but he was back by June, singing a different tune, and sporting Miss Rita right by his side. And he sang, dance a little closer to me, dance a little closer now, dance a little closer tonight, dance a little closer to me, 'cause it's closing time, love's on sale tonight at this fine dime. Eddie tried with the ballroom bands till arthritis took his hands, and now he sells insurance on the side. And Rita's got a house to keep, diamond store and all her love so sweet. It danced to the radio late at night, and they sing, dance a little closer. Dance a little closer now, dance a little closer tonight, dance a little closer to me, 'cause it's closing time, love's on sale tonight at this fine dime. Oh, love's on sale tonight at this fine dime. Ooh. So I've been singing that song almost half my life, you know? And I've been singing it since I was like, I think I was 25 when it came out or something. And you think, oh yeah, I know that song. That's After the Five Dime, I know that song. And then these stories get told to you, and you have these experiences. And there are nights when the picture of my friend Vivian passes in front of my face while I'm singing that song. Vivian died on Good Friday a couple of years ago. And when she left this world, she had gone back into the coma, but they kept the music going. And as she passed from this earth, 2 members of the Nashville Symphony played her out while her boat kept going this time. She knew what she wanted. She wanted a viola player and a cello player, and that's what she got. And I can't think of a better way to leave this earth. There are a couple of other kind of family stories that I wanted to tell you about music. I went through this time, I really kind of a time of walking through fire a few years ago, where my parents both got diagnosed with terminal illnesses a month apart. My dad had cancer, my mom had Alzheimer's. And so we sort of prepared ourselves for the unknown. And my dad died before my mom. And he would go into his room sometimes and he would play an old Roger Miller song called Old Friends. And he would do this like after dinner. He'd just go in and shut the door and listen to this song. And he'd come back down in his eyes. But he was able to feel everything, all of his full range of his emotions while he was going through this. And music was his gateway. And when he was leaving this earth, my brothers and I were there with him, and one of my brothers was holding his hand. My husband was at his feet, and I was holding his other hand, and he would breathe for a while, and he would start to drift, and he would breathe, and then he would start to drift. And so we were just waiting, we were just sort of holding with him so that he wouldn't be alone. And in the middle of it, my brother Mike, now this is like a NASCAR guy, okay? This is like a guy who goes to the races, and he's a good old boy, a little heart of gold. He started singing in Italian. My dad was first generation Italian. My grandparents came over from Italy, and my brother Mike started singing this lullaby. And I didn't know he knew it. It's a lullaby my dad sang to me when I was a kid, but I didn't realize that he would have also sung it to my brother Mike. So he started singing out of the blue, and I started singing with him. And we sang this song back to my dad that he sang to us on the front end of our lives, back to him on the back end of his life. And in that moment, we never talked about it. But I had this connection with my brother that was new. And we had a connection with my dad that was beyond words, where we could just say, we remember, we know. And in that moment, we weren't just connected to each other and him, we were connected to our grandmother. We were connected to all of the people back in Italy. It's a lullaby about the place where our family's from. And so it's been sung for hundreds of years in that part of the country. And suddenly we were keeping up a tradition that connects us to all of these people. So my dad passed, and my mom asked the question where he was, and we learned how to deal with that, what she could and couldn't remember. And I decided at that point that I was going to go home as much as I could to help her, because I was one of the people that she knew for her whole life. So I wanted to help her stay glued to the planet for as long as I could. So I went home about every 4 to 6 weeks. And this one summer, a bunch of us from West Virginia University, where I went, we decided we were going to have a big reunion of all of us that played music together and hung out together when I was in college. So we were going to camp out on a friend's farm up in the mountains, and I had stopped to see my mom and spend a few days with her on the way. And I had ordered a guitar in the mail for a friend of mine's kid who was getting into playing. And it got delivered that day, and I thought, well, I should see if it got damaged while it was shipped. So I got it out and I tuned it up, and I hit a chord. And my mother, like Pavlov's dog, looked up and went, Rita was 16 years, hazel eyes and chestnut hair. And I just about lost it. I couldn't speak. And this lovely caregiver, Nancy, that helped take care of my mom and my dad, she said, oh, honey, I forgot. Well, your mom gets really restless in the evening, so when we're making dinner, she comes in and she sits at the kitchen table, and we put the boombox in the middle of the kitchen table, and we play Your Greatest Hits CD, and we sing and sing and sing. So this was my mother's regular Friday afternoon routine, and this was the first song on the CD, so that's what she launched into. But for my whole life, my mom never sang. She was tone deaf. She had been married to a man young in her life who died young, and he was a band director, and he asked her please to not sing. Yeah. But when she got Alzheimer's, she forgot that she couldn't sing, so she sang all the time. So I got out my guitar that day, and I sang with my mom for the first time all afternoon. We sang every song on my greatest hits CD, and I just watched her. There was no worry about how she sounded. There was just joy, just complete abandon, and it was so beautiful, and it was just one of the great memories of my life. And a year later, when she didn't know me anymore, and she couldn't make a sentence, she could still sing all the verses to You Are My Sunshine. And that taught me something about music and how deeply it lives in us. It lives deeper than our ability to use language or know ourselves or each other. It lives in a whole other place. And it was our last connection. And it was such a gift to have that in that moment. I remember noticing, as Alzheimer's progressed, her tuning into music became more and more. She would sit in front of the TV, and when the commercials would come on, she'd tap my arm to the time of the music. I wouldn't even be noticing the music in the commercials. That's my fondest memory of music and its healing power, and its power to connect. But there was one song on that CD that I couldn't sing with my mom. It's the only one I didn't do. And I thought it might be a nice way to end this gathering, this little talk. This is a song that my husband wrote many years ago that I recorded, and it's a true story. And when I started singing this song, I was retelling the story about my husband's grandma and grandpa. And this song, the stories around it for myself and other people that I'm holding have just grown exponentially since the day I stepped into the studio to sing these words. Claire had all but given up when she and Edwin fell in love. She touched his face and shook her head in disbelief. She sighed and said, in many dreams I've held you near, but now at last you're really here. Where have you been? I've looked for you forever and a day. Where have you been? I'm just not myself when you're away. He asked her for her hand for life, and she became a salesman's wife. He was home each night by 8, but one stormy evening he was late. Her frightened tears fell to the floor until its key turned in the door. Where have you been? I've looked for you forever and a day. Where have you been? I'm just not myself when you're away. They never spent a night apart for 16